Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today is the second part of the lecture on systemic lupus erythematosus. Complications and comorbidities. First of all, joints. Joints are involved in 90% of the patients suffering from SLE. So you can say that joint complication is the most common complication in patients of systemic lupus erythematosus. Arthralgias are more common than arthritis. Rheumatoid-like deformities is present in 25% of the cases. Rarely erosive symmetrical polyarthritis with rheumatoid arthritis-like deformities, which is called as the rupus, can occur. Rupus is a term which is used for symmetrical polyarthritis, which is similar to rheumatoid arthritis. These patients may be distinguished from those with lupus arthropathy due to the presence of anti-cyclic citrullinated peptide antibodies, anti-CCP antibodies. Jacquet's arthritis is the severe deformity of hands with ulnar deviation and swan neck deformities. Tendinopathies may result in tendon rupture and subcutaneous nodules. Elbow, shoulder, knee, and feet may be involved, and soft tissue nodules may occur, indicating calcinosis. So the most common arthritis in patients with SLE is rheumatoid arthritis-like deformities. The features that distinguish SLE from rheumatoid arthritis. Deforming arthritis is seen in 5% of SLE patients, while in rheumatoid arthritis, it is very common. Subcutaneous nodules are seen in 5% of SLE patients, while is seen in 25% of rheumatoid arthritis patients. Radiological erosions are rare in SLE and more common in rheumatoid arthritis. Then kidney involvement is common in SLE, while rare in rheumatoid arthritis. Positive LE cells test is, of course, common in 80% positivity in SLE, while 15% positivity in rheumatoid arthritis. And positive anti-nuclear antibody is seen in 90% of SLE patients and 20% of rheumatoid arthritis patients. While the rheumatoid factors are present in 80% of rheumatoid arthritis patients and 40% of SLE patients. Muscle changes. Muscle pain occur in approximately 50% of the patients, and this may be confused with pain of arthritis. Muscle weakness is less common feature and can be related to steroid myopathy or other drug effects. Inflammatory myopathy is not a feature of SLE, but however, 5 to 10% of the patient may present with inflammatory myopathy. Bone changes. Avascular necrosis of bone occur in 5 to 30% of the patients. Risk factors include the presence of Raynaud's phenomena, vasculitis, antiphospholipid syndrome, and glucocorticoid use. Femoral head or condyle are most frequently involved. It is commonly bilateral with involvement of multiple joints. Diagnosis should be considered in patients with persistent pain over one or several joints, and when there is little activity in other systems. Surgical management options include core decompression, bone grafting, and joint replacement. The prevalence of osteoporosis may attain 50%, with fracture occurring in 20% of the individuals with SLE. Factors contributing to the bone loss include chronic inflammation, glucocorticoid use, renal dysfunction, vitamin D deficiency, ovarian failure, and concomitant thyroid diseases. Identification of risk factors include and regular bone mineral density measurements and appropriate therapy are critical. So since steroids are given for a long period of time in SLE, so the bone densities should be tested very regularly. Heart. Cardiovascular disease is one of the main prognostic predictors in SLE and responsible for increase in late mortality of the disease. Pleurisy and pericarditis have 17% of the prevalence. Significant valvular dysfunctions may occur in 1 to 2% of the patients. Coronary artery disease is the most common cause of death in patients with long-standing SLE. Young women with SLE are at increased risk of myocardial infarction. Treatment with corticosteroids increase the risk of developing coronary artery disease and also contributing to hyperlipidemia, hypertension, and weight gain. Lungs. The transient pleurisy is the most common feature, and approximately 2/3 of the cases have some fluid development. Occasionally, this fluid may be hemorrhagic. Involvement of lung is less frequent. Acute pneumonitis with dyspnea and fever is a rare entity in SLE. Shrinking lung syndrome is a condition that is typical of SLE, but it is rare. Pulmonary hypertension occurs rarely as compared to systemic sclerosis. So remember, in collagen vascular diseases, lungs are involved more frequently in systemic sclerosis and less frequently in SLE. Renal changes. The renal changes in SLE are very important in assessing the prognosis. Renal disease in lupus accounts for 3% of end-stage renal failure and is an important cause of mortality in SLE. There is a need for regular screening by urine analysis, by blood pressure monitoring, assessment of renal functions, and renal biopsy is critical in many cases. The renal exacerbations are associated with high titer of anti-nuclear antibody, elevated DNA bindings, and low serum complement level. So the prognosis of renal disease is assessed by ANA, anti-double stranded DNA, and by serum complement level. Kidney damage, if this is going to develop, usually appears early, that is within first 3 years, and is more frequent and severe in younger patients. Renal biopsy in every patient with hematuria, proteinuria, or elevated serum creatinine is advisable. GI tract. Gastrointestinal symptoms occur in 50% of the patient, but in most of them, the symptoms are mild and restricted to anorexia, nausea, vomiting. Esophageal dysmotility is common, resulting in heartburn and regurgitation. And remember, this esophageal dysmotility is more common in systemic sclerosis rather than SLE. Pancreatitis is a rare complication and it is associated with long-term steroid use. And ascites occur as a manifestation of nephrotic syndrome or kidney damage. However, the heart failure, protein-losing enteropathies, constructive pericarditis, and lupus serositis is associated with ascites. Because polyserositis is a feature of SLE. Hepatic lesions. Liver disease is present in approximately 1/3 of patients, but it is usually mild and often asymptomatic. The hepatic lesions are usually granulomatous hepatitis, chronic active hepatitis, and cirrhosis. Autoimmune hepatitis is diagnosed by the presence of interface hepatitis, hypergammaglobulinemia, and presence of autoantibodies. Type 1 autoimmune hepatitis, previously named as the leukemia hepatitis, may involve young women who have antibodies to smooth muscles, anti-smooth muscle antibodies. Thyroid disease, both hyperthyroidism and hypothyroidism is associated with SLE. Nervous system. Nervous system is included in the criteria of SLE, and involvement of nervous system by SLE results in neurological and psychiatric manifestations. The ACR produced a standard nomenclature and case definition for 19 neuropsychiatric syndromes known to occur in patients with SLE, with prevalence between 37% to 95%. In decreasing order of frequency, there are cognitive dysfunctions, headache, mood disorders, cerebrovascular diseases, seizures, polyneuropathy, anxiety, and psychosis. Neuropsychiatric events commonly occur within the first year of diagnosis of SLE and in the presence of generalized disease activity. Peripheral sensory motor or autonomic neuropathy occur brought about by vasculitis and vasa nervosa. SLE may also cause psychiatric symptoms, including anxiety, hypomania, emotional liability, memory defect, and depression. The steroids may also add up to these psychiatric symptoms. Diagnostic workup should include lumbar puncture and CSF analysis to exclude any infection, EEG, and conventional CT scan and MRI scan to, um, to find other causes. Eyes. Visual loss may be a presenting symptom. The most common ocular manifestation is dry eyes, keratoconjunctivitis sicca caused by secondary Sjogren's syndrome. You see these different collagen vascular diseases or autoimmune diseases, they have an overlap with each other. So even when the dry eyes is not a feature of SLE, there can be overlap with Sjogren's syndrome, and patient may manifest with certain dry eyes and keratoconjunctivitis sicca. Retinal vasculopathy is the next common manifestation. Optic neuropathy is associated with poor visual prognosis. Ears. Sudden sensorineural hearing loss may occur in patients with SLE and may be associated with antiphospholipid syndrome. And treatment with anticoagulant is indicated in such patients. So in a summary, you see the SLE patient has a lot of photosensitivity with a butterfly rash over the cheek and erythematous rash to area exposed to the sunlight. In lung, it manifests as tachypnea, cough, and pleural inflammation and effusion. Pleura is involved more common as compared to the lung parenchyma. General symptoms include the weight loss, fatigue, fever, increased chances of other infections, the arthritis, emotional liability, the hematological disorders, and neurological disorders. On heart, the main effect is the pericarditis, vascular inflammation, and collagen vascular disease. And kidney characterizes by the lupus nephritis, proteinuria, and hematuria. SLE in childhood. Approximately 15 to 20% of SLE has its onset in childhood. The clinical picture course treatment is similar to the disorder in adults, but on the whole, children have a more severe disease. Malar rash, mucocutaneous involvement, hematological abnormalities, seizures, renal involvement, urinary cellular casts, and proteinuria, adenopathy, and fever are more common in children. Prolonged therapy with high dose of steroid may increase the disease-related damage and may be avoided by judicious use of immunosuppressives. So management of SLE in children is always difficult. The patients are always serious with more side effects and more chances of drug-related side effects. SLE in elderly. The onset of disease over 50 years of age occur in 12 to 18% of the patients. There is an increased incidence of Raynaud's disease, the Sicca syndrome, and pleuritis. Antibodies to Rho and La are frequent, and there appear to be an association with HLA-DR3. Then SLE in pregnancy. Fertility is normal if renal function is good. There is higher risk of complicated pregnancies in SLE in all patients, regardless of whether or not SLE is active. The active lupus nephritis possesses the greater risk to pregnancy outcome in lupus, and the patient should not be advised to get pregnant in such cases. The increased risk of fetal death may be because of immune complex deposition on the trophoblast basement membrane. The antiphospholipid syndrome is characterized by presence of antiphospholipid antibodies in the setting of either vascular thrombosis when untreated and may lead to increased rate of fetal loss in 45 to 90% of pregnancies. This falls considerably to less than 30% if treatment is given. Antiphospholipid we will discuss in detail in the next lecture. Management of SLE in pregnancy. Regarding the management of lupus during pregnancy, oral corticosteroids are relatively safe, and side effects include a small absolute risk of cleft lip or palate. Prednisolone is recommended as less than 10% of the dose will cross the maternal fetal membranes. Steroid may also need to be temporarily increased at the time of delivery and postpartum. If patient is on azathioprine, this should be continued, as there is no evidence of increase in rate of malformation. So as an immunosuppressive agent, azathioprine is preferable. However, mycophenolate mofetil is contraindicated. Hydroxychloroquine may be continued as there is an evidence that it reduces the disease flare and may decrease the risk of cardiac, neonatal, lupus, and heart blocks in mothers with anti-RO antibodies. So steroids and hydroxychloroquine and azathioprine are the recommended treatment options for patients in SLE. The estrogen-containing contraceptive should be avoided in lupus patient with positive anticardiolipin or lupus anticoagulant. The progesterone-only contraceptive, Depo-Provera or other options are used. In patient taking azathioprine, no adverse event have been reported in breastfed infants exposed to the drug, prompting the recommendation that feeding be given at least 4 hours post-maternal dose. That means after 4 hours of azathioprine dose into the mother. Breastfeeding is probably safe in patients if the patient is on aspirin and low-dose steroid or hydroxychloroquine, but should probably be avoided if other immunosuppressives are used. So as mentioned before, the steroids, azathioprine, hydroxychloroquine, they all are can safely be given to mothers who are breastfeeding. Kikuchi-Fujimoto disease and SLE. Kikuchi-Fujimoto disease is a benign and usually self-limiting histocytic necrotizing lymphadenitis of unknown etiology. Reported cases are predominantly female, but can occur in male and all ages. Clinical features include tender lymphadenopathy, most commonly the cervical lymph nodes, fever, weight loss, and night sweats. Association between SLE, which can present concurrently or follow a diagnosis of Kikuchi-Fujimoto disease. So there is a great deal of association with SLE, and it presents with or after SLE, or diagnosis of SLE. Kikuchi-Fujimoto disease can present concurrently with SLE with a photo-distributed eruption consisting of erythematous, vesicular, EM-like lesions predominantly on face, associated with vasculopathic lesions on finger, top of hands, and palms. In most cases, no treatment is required, but prednisolone may speed resolution. Disease course and prognosis of SLE. The course of SLE is very variable. Acute fulminating cases are much less common than subacute cases, and the disease may continue for years. The 5-year survival rate of patients with SLE is 95% in current century. The survival is related to organ involvement and to the frequency of exacerbations. Serological as well as clinical remission is uncommon and occurred in 4% of the patients. Exacerbations are more frequent in first 5 years of disease. Pregnancy does not affect the long-term survival. Prolonged survival is associated with increased risk of atherosclerosis, avascular necrosis, and neuropsychiatric dysfunctions. In elderly people, the presentation is insidious and clinical course is relatively benign. Renal disease and serological abnormalities are less frequent, and arthritis and pleuropericarditis are more common. The better prognosis is a result not only of administration of corticosteroid, but also of early diagnosis, avoidance of stress, and drugs such as sulfonamides, and control of infection by antibiotics. Persistent cause of death include the renal disease, severe lupus disease activity, infection, and cardiovascular disease. So the cause of disease is mainly kidney and heart disease and infections. Total cancer mortality risk in SLE was observed with increased mortality from hematological malignancies such as non-Hodgkin lymphoma and lung cancer, but decreased mortality from breast cancer. Laboratory investigations. Because of the varying clinical morphologies, a skin biopsy is often necessary to confirm the diagnosis. And then biopsy for DIF is mostly unnecessary. The lupus band test done on unaffected skin, non-sun exposed skin is mainly of historic interest nowadays because of the modified serological tests that are available. Most patients with LE will develop anemia at some point of time. Anemia can be due to chronic disease, iron deficiency, autoimmune hemolytic anemia, drug-induced myelotoxicity, or anemia of chronic renal failure. So there are different causes of anemia in patients of SLE. The leukopenia occur in 50% of patients with SLE. More specifically, the lymphopenia is reported. Thrombocytopenia is a common clinical manifestation and correlate with increased mortality and cumulative damage. Anemia, leukopenia, and thrombocytopenia, all three are included in the diagnostic criteria of SLE. ESR is raised at some time in nearly 90% of the patient. C-reactive protein is normal in absence of infections. Polyclonal gammopathy is commonly observed in patients with SLE and is an indication of autoimmune reaction. Hypoalbuminemia is reported in 30 to 50% of the patient. IgE antibody may be raised and correlate with nephritis in SLE. The false positive serology of syphilis is found in 25% of the cases. Thrombosis occur with lupus anticoagulants. So lupus anticoagulant is one of the number of antiphospholipid antibodies present in 15 to 34% of the patient of SLE. And cardiolipin is found in 12 to 30% of the patient. So these antibodies are mainly antibodies of antiphospholipid syndrome. In total, 50% of SLE patients testing positive for these antibodies will develop clinical event consistent with antiphospholipid syndrome. As well as thrombosis of central nervous system is strongly related to presence of these antibodies. The LE cell phenomena is positive in over 80% of the patient. This test is rarely done nowadays. LE cells have already discussed are the neutrophils that have engulfed the nuclear material from degenerated white cells in the presence of antibody of deoxyribonucleoprotein, which is called as LE cell factor. The positive LE cell test is a feature of drug-induced LE. LE cell test has now been superseded by the test of by anti-nuclear factor and anti-DNA antibodies. This is the LE cell phenomena. You can see the neutrophils, and the dark blue color is the engulfed nuclear material from the degenerated white cells. One or more anti-nuclear antibody can be detected by fluorescent antibody techniques in over 80% of the cases of SLE. The cell line used nowadays is HAP2 cells, derived from the human laryngeal cell line. Previously, the standard substrate was rat or mouse liver. Using rat liver, 4 staining patterns were historically demonstrated and represented the 4 types of anti-nuclear antibodies. The most common is the homogeneous pattern produced by anti-nucleohistones. The nuclei is stained all over. Then the second pattern is the speckled pattern. And in speckled pattern, the antigens are soluble proteins. Nucleolar pattern, where the nucleolus is stained, and peripheral type, which is seen in anti-DNA antibodies, which stain the periphery of the nucleus. So this is the homogeneous pattern of anti-nuclear antibody staining. This is the speckled pattern. Then this is the nucleolar pattern. You can see the nucleolus, which is stained by the antibodies. Anticentromere pattern, which is seen in systemic sclerosis. Then peripheral type of anti-nuclear antibody staining is seen by anti-double stranded DNA antibodies. These staining patterns are produced by separate antibodies. So no particular antibody is specific for the disease. The homogeneous anti-nuclear factor is more than twice as common as the speckled factor. Peripheral factor is present in high titer in more than 50% of the cases with active disease. The so-called shrunken peripheral pattern is thought to be associated with poor prognosis and high incidence of renal disease. Any person in apparently good health found to have a high titer of anti-nuclear factor should be followed up for years, as there is a considerable likelihood of developing LE or systemic sclerosis. So even if a patient is healthy and found to have anti-nuclear antibody positivity, that patient should be followed up even if there are no other symptoms. On the other hand, low titer, that is less than 160, in the absence of clinical symptom and sign, can be ignored. When HEP2 cells are used as substrate, further patterns can be identified. These include anti-centromere staining associated with CREST syndrome. Hence, homogeneous and peripheral pattern, which is specific to SLE, fine and coarse speckled and ground glass pattern is associated with SCL70 antibodies found in systemic sclerosis. So the homogeneous and peripheral pattern is common in SLE, while the speckled or the ground glass pattern is more common, and anti-centromere pattern is more common in systemic sclerosis. The circulating antibodies to DNA is almost always present in active disease and may occur in absence of anti-nuclear factor. Levels often correlate with disease activity. So anti-DNA antibody levels are always done serially in case to assess the disease activity. A combination of anti-double stranded DNA and low serum complement and a high positive has a very high positive predictive value for the diagnosis of SLE. Instead of serial monitoring of anti-nuclear antibody, anti-dsDNA antibody titer sometimes correlate with disease activity and lupus nephritis. So for monitoring of disease activity, anti-double stranded DNA antibody level is more important as compared to anti-nuclear antibody. A high titer of greater than 200 international units per ml titer have been shown to be an independent predictor of moderate to severe SLE. Low C3 have been shown to be an independent predictor of severe lupus flare. Several other antibodies occur in patients with SLE. These include anti-Smith antibodies in 30% of SLE, but this is not important for monitoring the disease activity. Anti-histone antibodies are associated with drug-induced lupus. Anti-ribonucleoprotein antibodies are seen in 23 to 40% and is more characteristic of mixed connective tissue disease. So such patient you will find other features of other collagen vascular diseases. The anti-Rho antibodies is antibody to an RNP derived from RNA polymerase. This anti-Rho is seen in approximately 30 to 40% of the patient and have an increased tendency to photosensitivity, to secondary Sjogren's syndrome, to interstitial pneumonia, and shrinking lung syndrome and deforming arthropathy. So anti-Rho antibody has lots of prognostic significance in patient of SLE. The anti-La antibodies is another RNP product and is present in 10 to 15% of the patient with Sjogren's syndrome. Anti-Rho and anti-La antibody should be tested in any female patient of SLE, in mixed connective tissue disease, in Sjogren's syndrome, and increased risk of neonatal lupus syndrome. In LE-EM syndrome, there is a speckled type of anti-nuclear factor, which was originally described as SJT, but now thought to be anti-La, and rheumatoid factor. Different antibodies in SLE. Anti-nuclear antibody has a prevalence of 98%. Anti-dsDNA 70%. Anti-SM 25%. Anti-RNP 40%. Anti-Rho 30%. La 10%. Anti-histone 70%. Anti-phospholipid 50%. So if we compare the sensitivity and specificity of different antibodies in SLE, anti-nuclear antibody has a very high degree of sensitivity, that is more than 95%, but has a low specificity of 60%. This is reversed in case of anti-double stranded DNA, whose specificity is 95% and whose sensitivity is 70%. Anti-SM antibody is very specific for SLE but has sensitivity of only 25%. Anti-histone antibody has equal specificity and sensitivity, that is 50%. Anti-Rho or SSA is seen in 30 to 50% and anti-La or SSB in 15 to 30% sensitivity. The cryoglobulins may be found in 11% of the patients, and cryoglobulinemia may precede the manifestation of SLE by many years. Inherited deficiency of major complement components may occur in SLE. Patients with homozygous deficiency of C1, C2, and C4, early component of classical pathway, are particularly at risk of SLE. Isolated C1q deficiency have been reported and associated between C1 esterase inhibitor deficiency and SLE. There is a subset of SLE which is called as anti-nuclear antibody negative SLE. This concept was introduced in 1976, with many patients presenting to dermatologists with cutaneous findings similar to SLE, positive anti-Rho antibodies, and photosensitivity. Sorry, cutaneous findings similar to subacute cutaneous LE. Clinically, a non-scarring malar flush, oral ulceration, photosensitivity, papillosquamous or annular lesion on face, trunk, and arms are prominent, but arthritis, serositis, renal disease, hematological involvement are less frequent as expected in SLE. In approximately 5 to 10% of SLE, the anti-nuclear factor cannot be demonstrated using the standard substrate like rat or mouse. But if we do the HEP2 cells, then this is rarely a problem in 2% of the patients. So over 60% of patients have anti-Rho antibodies, approximately 1/3 have anti-La antibodies, and 25% have antibodies of single-strand DNA. So it can be summarized that anti-nuclear antibody SLE is now a rarity when we are using the HEP2 cell line, because HEP2 cell line has only 2% of negativity in cases of definitive SLE. But however, if such kind of patients are encountered, then it is diagnosed by the peculiar rash and presence of anti-Rho antibody and photosensitivity. And such patients have less chances of having serious systemic complications like renal disease, hematological involvement, arthritis, and serositis. There is no difference in histology of skin between anti-nuclear negative and positive cases. Topical corticosteroid may be helpful, but oral antimalarial steroids may be required. Approximately 10% of patients eventually become positive for anti-nuclear factor. Assessment of disease activity. The global measures such as European Community Lupus Active measures, SLE Disease Activity Index, and more detailed British IELTS lupus activity grading are useful in context of the clinical trials in patients with active systemic disease. However, none of these is specifically designed for assessment of patients who most concerned dermatologists do not grade skin disease in any meaningful way. The cutaneous lupus erythematosus disease and severity index, called as CLASI, has been described for assessment of cutaneous disease. The CLASI provides a quantitative measurement of skin-specific burden of the disease. It also distinguishes clearly between activity and damage, which is important for the disease management. The management of SLE can be divided into non-pharmacological and pharmacological management. The non-pharmacological or the general measures include, the first and foremost is the sun avoidance. Patients should be advised to wear broad-brimmed hats to cover the V of the neck and arms, and to use sunscreens with sun protection factor of at least 55. Sunscreen with avobenzene block UVA1, titanium dioxide or zinc block UVB and UVA1 are recommended to block the longer UVA wavelengths. Smoking cessation should be encouraged because smoking always exacerbates the disease. Furthermore, the patient of SLE has an increased risk of accelerated atherosclerosis. Patients of SLE are advised to take oral vitamin D3, 1,000 international unit daily per oral to supplement the dietary vitamin D requirements. Then pharmacological therapy. It's a big subject. The choice of pharmacological therapy depends upon the degree of organ involvement and the disease severity. It is important to assess the patient's progress by general well-being and relief of symptoms rather than by strict attention to the laboratory abnormalities. So it is always important that check the patient well-being rather than checking the laboratory parameters. ESR and DNA antibodies are variable and poor guide to adequacy of the therapy. Titer of DNA anti-nuclear antibody often persist unchanged despite of clinical remission. So again, the importance should be given to the patient well-being. As mentioned previously, anti-double-stranded DNA antibody and serum complement levels are useful indicators to predict the exacerbations and remissions. Despite this, a subset of patients with elevated anti-double-stranded DNA and hypocomplementemia do not demonstrate evidence of clinical disease activity when followed up. For skin disease alone, topical therapy is quite appropriate, first-line therapy. Potency depends upon the site, but generally potent fluorinate topical corticosteroid should only be used for shorter period of time on very inflamed lesion of the face. Because they have a potential of causing atrophy and telangiectasias. And soon after, low potency corticosteroid like 1% hydrocortisone should be used. Alternatively, calcineurin inhibitors, tacrolimus or pymrolimus may be equally efficacious when compared with clobetasol propionate 0.05% and betamethasone valerate 0.1%. So intralesional triamcinolone acetonide may be useful in individual lesions, particularly the discoid lesions on the scalp. Antimalarials. Antimalarials are used for patients with extensive or resistant disease. The use of antimalarial chloroquine or hydroxychloroquine should also be encouraged not only in the management of mild disease, but in all disease subsets. They prevent the lupus flare and increase long-term survival of the patient. Antimalarials have also been found to work synergistically with mycophenolate mofetil for the treatment of membranous nephritis. Additionally, they have a modest effect in lipid profile, in CVS disease, and thrombotic risk. So antimalarials have lots of benefits in patients of SLE. Hydroxychloroquine particularly has been found to decrease the lupus activity in pregnancy without harming the babies. Then comes the corticosteroids. The corticosteroids are useful, but dosage depends on the degree of organ involvement and the disease severity. Low dose prednisolone, that is 0.1 to 0.2 milligram per kg, may be useful in patients with mild disease and musculoskeletal manifestations which are resistant to other therapies. High dose prednisolone, that is 1 to 1.5 milligram per kilogram, or IV methylprednisolone 1 gram daily for 3 days, which is the pulse therapy, may be useful in severe disease with major organ involvement like renal, systemic vasculitis, and neurological involvement. Once the condition appears to be under control, dose may be reduced until a maintenance dose is reached, which is usually less than 6 milligram. As the Hopkins lupus cohort have demonstrated that the dose greater than 6 milligram increase the risk of organ damage by more than 50%. So usually the patient should be managed with a dose around about 6 milligram of corticosteroid daily. Single daily dose given in the morning produce fewer side effects and does not impair the therapeutic response. Some fulminating cases have been treated with massive doses of steroids, but the advantage of such therapy rarely outweighs the risk, and complications such as steroid-induced psychosis may occur, which may be difficult to distinguish from neuropsychiatric SLE. Steroid myopathy can also occur with high dose of corticosteroid, but usually improved by tapering the steroids and by physical therapy. Then comes the third important drugs which are used in SLE patients. These are the immunosuppressive drugs. The immunosuppressive drugs are used for more severe disease and are used to minimize the risk of damage and to act as the steroid-sparing agents. When considering the choice of immunosuppressants, the disease severity and long-term risk of malignancy must be considered. First is the cyclophosphamide. The cyclophosphamide have been associated with bladder cancer, myelodysplastic syndromes, hematological malignancies, cervical atypia, and skin cancers. Mesna may reduce the urotoxic side effects, and mostly IV therapy is rarely complicated by bladder injury. For induction therapy in lupus nephritis, pulse IV cyclophosphamide is preferred to oral cyclophosphamide because of reduced toxicity, particularly the bladder injury, and it is soon followed by mycophenolate mofetil or azathioprine. The former is more efficacious in maintenance therapy as compared to azathioprine. So better to change to mycophenolate mofetil in severe nephritis. Then second is the azathioprine. Azathioprine is associated with development of lymphomas and increased risk of human papilloma virus related pre-malignant and malignant lesions. Because of its slower onset of action, azathioprine often used as a steroid-sparing agent and as a maintenance drug following the control of more acute SLE. It has been reported to be effective in severe cutaneous disease and in treatment of chronic active hepatitis complicating lupus. Azathioprine can be used in pregnancy, and there are no report of tetragenicity, so azathioprine is among the safest immunosuppressive drugs in patient who are pregnant as well as breastfeeding. Mycophenolate mofetil is a non-competitive reversible inhibitor of inosine 5 monophosphate dehydrogenase. Inhibition of both T and B lymphocyte proliferation, inhibition of antibody formation, and prevention of leukocyte migration is the result. So mycophenolate mofetil is very effective in all the different pathogenic pathways in SLE. For patients with significant gastrointestinal side effects, titrating the dose from 500 milligram twice daily to 1.1 to 1.5 gram twice daily with weekly increase may be useful. Mycophenolate mofetil is, however, contraindicated in pregnancy, and in patient wishing to become pregnant, a transition to mycophenolate mofetil to azathioprine is made. It may be used as an alternate for induction treatment of mild to moderate lupus nephritis with similar efficacy to cyclophosphamide. So if cyclophosphamide is not used, then the second drug to be used in induction therapy of lupus nephritis is mycophenolate mofetil. Methotrexate may be useful adjuvant in patient with mild to moderate SLE with recalcitrant mucocutaneous lesion and musculoskeletal symptoms. Following the failure of antimalarials in patients with predominant skin disease, methotrexate in dose of 7.5 to 15 milligram weekly is effective and quick-acting therapy. The metho-treated group of patients had significant more resolution of arthritis, rash, and hypercompletinemia with significant decrease in mean prednisolone dose at follow-up. So whenever the patient have either failure of antimalarial therapy or is suffering from the musculoskeletal symptoms, methotrexate will be a preferable choice over mycophenolate mofetil and azathioprine. Methotrexate is teratogenic and contraindicated in women within 3 months of planned conception. Patients should be monitored regularly for a decline in renal function, and their full blood picture and liver functions are done serially. In addition, meticulous contraception is used in married women with the risk of pregnancy. Other therapies for patients of SLE include intravenous immunoglobulin, which is usual adjuvant in resistant skin disease. Cyclosporin have been used in resistant cases and for non-renal lupus because it has a renal side effect, so it cannot be given in patient having the renal lupus. Other potential treatment include leflunomide therapy, which is more commonly used in rheumatoid arthritis and have a comparable efficacy to standard therapy of proliferative nephritis. However, it is potent teratogenic and absolutely contraindicated in women who are at risk of pregnancy. Plasmapheresis is useful in managing the life-threatening complications. UVA1 have the modest effect on cutaneous disease. Low fat, high marine oil diet modified disease activity in 27 patients. For patients with lupus non-specific skin eruption, dapsone may be useful for treatment of urticarial and bullous eruption. You know that the bullous SLE is associated with high neutrophils. Biological agents. Biological agents used to treat lupus include rituximab, which is a monoclonal antibody to CD20, and belimumab, which is a B lymphocyte stimulator inhibitor. Both ACR and EULAR support the use of rituximab in treatment of refractory nephritis. Belimumab have been shown to improve overall SLE activity, particularly the mucocutaneous and musculoskeletal disease. The other biological therapies that may be useful in SLE include monoclonal antibodies, tocilizumab, which is an interleukin-6 receptor inhibitor, and T-cell inhibitor, which is abatacept, a fusion protein of T lymphocyte associated antigen 4 and modified FC portion of human immunoglobulin. But both these two are still in the trial stages. So that's all for today. And I hope that this lecture would help you further in understanding SLE. Although I have given this lecture a little rapidly, but I would still like that if you have any queries or questions, you will inbox me and ask for clarification. Thank you all and have a good day.